Welcome to today's webinar presented by Rahi Systems, titled Build Flexibility into Office Design with Snaketray. In this webinar, Scott Jacobity from Snaketray will discuss how to quickly adapt to changing space requirements in a post-pandemic world. When employees return to their offices, chances are they will look very different from the ones they left behind before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Scott Jacobity. I am the National Sales Manager with Cable Management Solutions, otherwise known as Snaketray. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can build some flexibility into the office space as we start to move forward through this post-pandemic, and how some of our products really interface with the foreseeable changes that are going to be occurring within our offices. So what's happened? Well, we have millions and millions of people that have really been forced out of our built environment in the office space that are working at home. And as we start to move forward to the reopening of our country and also the world, we're going to have to start looking at some changes to the office environment to start to bring people back. People are a little nervous, as they have every right to be, and we want to make sure that safety is of utmost importance. We've looked in the past at dollars per square foot of construction cost, and that's still going to be at the forefront. We're still going to need to pay attention to that, but we're going to really need to look at how we're going to keep people safe in the future as we start to bring people back, especially into closer proximities. Okay, so what are some of the things that we'll likely see as we bring people back to the office environment? First thing obviously will be additional cleaning protocols. We're going to need to maintain sanitary conditions. We've maybe lost a little bit of contact with that as we've grown, and this really starts to bring that home, is that we need to be washing our hands more and keeping our spaces more sanitary. So definitely some more emphasis on hand washing and hand washing stations. Keeping our workspaces clean will be a definite addition that we're going to see more and more of. Some of the things that have happened in the build cycle now of office spaces is we're definitely more communal. It used to be that everybody had their own little office cubicle and no one saw anybody. If you think about the old groundhog scenario of everybody popping their head up, that kind of went away. But as we move forward, we may see the pendulum swing back towards some of that. We do have a lot of workstations that face each other. So how do we get around that? Well, maybe turning them around again. Not having as much communal communication face to face. If we do keep them face to face, glass partitions, keeping the spaces separate, still have the visual and communication, but not being able to reach over and grab something off somebody else's desk. One of the other kind of fun things that came into being as offices started to gain more popularity and more communal spaces was that fun game room, where employees could kind of relax and unwind a little bit and spend a little bit of the time enjoying some recreation. Very good possibility that those kind of things are going to go away, and turn those spaces back into offices themselves. And the overall office itself is going to get a deeper clean. We're not going to come through once a week now and do a deep clean. It'll be every night. We will have a deep cleaning crew come through and make sure that everything is clean and safe and sanitary. Forget about hot desking. This is something that we feel is definitely going to go away. The whole concept of same space with multiple people using that space. Monday I'm here and Tuesday I'm there, and how do we really maintain sanitary conditions when we're hot desking, especially if it's multiple users in the same day? That's going to be very, very difficult to do. So we really feel that is going to be something that we'll see less and less of, if at all, as people start to migrate back towards the office environment. The really noticeable changes that are going to be very much towards the forefront is the fact of, personal space and social distancing, staying at least 6 feet apart from each other. Again, we are very communal individuals, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that. But this is one thing that we will see more and more of, and we're going to really have to abide by those regulations in order to keep people safe. We will see less and less of the old squeeze in at the table so that we can get more people in the conference room or at the lunch table. We maintaining that 6-foot distance is going to be a chore, but we won't see it in that squeezing in. Making hygiene stations more available throughout the office, not just with, hand cleaning stations in the bathrooms, but, throughout the entire workspace, hand cleaning and also materials to be able to clean your desks off with as well. I've seen in some instances where as the employee comes in for his daily work, he'll bring in almost a placemat to put down on his desk. That way, at the end of the day, he can bring it with him, so he's not constantly touching that surface. Installing contact-free doors in light switches so that we're not actually reaching out and touching things. I think we've all seen some of the door handles that are down low so that you're actually using your foot to open and close the door. That's something that we'll see more of. The fact of bathrooms not utilizing doors, having 2 entrances coming into a common space with a divider wall for privacy. I think the doors are going to really start to be minimized within the office environment itself. Definitely changing out air filters more often, installing newer air filters, installing UV systems to purify the air as well. That air quality is definitely at the forefront, and that's something that we can definitely start to see more and more of. Work surfaces being constructed out of antimicrobial surfaces so that we minimize the spread of any type of pathogens. These types of surfaces have been around for a long, long time. And that's something I believe that we'll start to see more and more of as well. And then the visual boundaries, something that, architects and interior designers, can have a little bit more fun with as well. Bolder graphics, areas that, you can visually see this is my space. Traffic patterns down aisleways, one-way traffic, having, roped off areas, hopefully not roped off, but, anything that's going to give us more of a visual cue to keep a safe distance away from each other. And hopefully it's only temporary. That's my hope and my wish for the future is that as we start to bring people back, that this is really just a temporary thing. But it's something that we have to pay attention to and look at in the future is the social distancing. And that's all fine. Keeping people apart from each other and still being able to maintain the communication is great. But one of the other aspects that we can really make a major impact in is the environmental air quality. Office buildings in particular are very notorious for having very poor air quality. And that's due to the fact that we have a tremendous amount of mixing of inflow and outflow of air. It's very dusty, exhaling of CO2 and pathogens and off-gassing of materials, and that all comes into play within the air quality. But by really looking at how do we deal with air management within the building is going to be at the forefront of a lot of the architectural and engineering designs that we see coming down the pipe. And one of the areas that we can really make a major impact is air delivery systems underneath raised floors. Raised floors are more prevalent in the European market than they are here in the United States. They've kind of got a better understanding of how we move air around. But I do feel as though as we move forward, especially with newer construction projects, that we will start to see an influx of more raised floor projects. Especially in the built environment for the office spaces. And the way that the air handling and the air quality is different between a raised floor environment and an environment that's built on slab is shown here in this first slide. You can see that the blue air is the inflow air and the red is the outflow air. Both of these occur at the ceiling level. So to make this work, the air as it comes into the space is pumped in at a high pressure, typically at a lower temperature. So we have a lot of issues with energy efficiencies here. But what happens is that air is then pushed down through the air column and is mixing with the exit air. So we have a tremendous amount of combination of in and out air happening even before it gets down to the user level. So why is this bad? Well, we have off-gassing of materials, of built-in materials. We have chemicals out there. We have airborne pathogens. I mean, we're sitting here in a pandemic. People, we exhale, so we have carbon dioxide that's going out here. And this is all mixing in that air column before it gets down to the users. And then it'll turn around and it'll get sucked back up into the ceiling as old air and go through a filtration system, and then get pumped back in again. So when we use a raised floor, the dynamics change. The in air, or the inflow, is going to come up from the raised floor space. So this is going to be the delivery system, will be that raised floor air. And each one of the people that are in the space will have their own individual air diffuser, which will allow them to control the temperature and how much air is coming into their space. And as you can see here from the graphic, that air doesn't mix with the outflow until well after the user area. So we have these little air columns that are coming up at each individual workstation. So we have a better quality air. It's going to be more sanitary. It's not going to mix as much with the other people that are out there and in the off-gassing that we have. And then that's brought up through the ceiling. So it really is a much better way to deliver the air. This air is also pumped in under the floor at a lower pressure, so it uses less energy. So for any of the LEED buildings that are out there, that's a much better way to control costs for environmentals. The sustainability of an underfloor air delivery system, as I said before, improves energy efficiencies. In the old way of doing it, I'm pumping high pressure cool air, say 50 degrees into the office space. As it goes down the air column, it starts to heat up, and then I finally get down to the user area at 70 degrees. In a raised floor environment, I'm only pumping it in at a low pressure and at 60 degrees. So there's a huge delta there in the cost of actually just heating and cooling the spaces. For all intents and purposes, it is a much healthier indoor environmental quality because I don't have as much mixing going on. The reduction of material, well, how does that work out? Well, in a traditional system where I have air coming in from the ceiling, I have all the ducts up there, and it's a lot of material. If I use a raised floor environment and that interstitial space between the floor and the slab, I don't need all the ductwork, so I can get that out of the equation. So there's a reduction of materials there. The design possibilities of allowing for a flexible space are much, much more enhanced. It's a heck of a lot easier to move a floor tile with a diffuser from point A to point B than it is to move ductwork. Ductwork is static, and let's face it, we're not going to move it when we have to move a work group. The whole idea of the flexible use within a raised floor is what it was built for, being able to move people around within that space. And we're going to see more and more of that as we bring more and more people back into the work environment. Which means, we're reusing those particular components. If the duct has to be moved, we're trashing it. We're not actually going to utilize that. Floor tiles and diffusers, we can move and reuse during the reconfiguration process. How does that really work into existing buildings? Well, retrofitting an existing slab building to a raised floor is very minimal at best. There's not a lot of that going on. We do have some cell floors that are out there to allow us to do that, very shallow floors. But those are not going to be utilized for any type of air management, which would be basically just cable management. Where we're going to see the most forward movement on a raised floor is going to be in new construction, where the architects and the owners will get together. They will decide that this is a much better way to keep their employees safe by being able to maintain safe air handling. It's really where we see it happen the most. There are instances where we may see some renovation work happening, but we need to have the physical space in order to do that. So to put a raised floor into an existing building, we need to have the ceiling heights. If we're already at an 8-foot ceiling height, you're not going to put a raised floor in there. So, having that volumetrics there is going to be key for the renovation products to happen for the raised floors. Here at Snake Tray, we do make some products that are specifically suited for those raised floors in both the low voltage communication circuits as well as the line voltage or the high voltage. We do have some cable trays that fit very nicely below a raised floor, and we also have a power delivery system, which is what we call Snake Bus. And this graphic kind of shows the layout of a typical electrical distribution throughout a raised floor environment. The whole concept of the Snake Bus was to bring in tremendous amount of power underneath that raised floor. We're looking at a 50 amp 3-phase circuit, which has an availability of about 18,000 watts of power. That is far more than any of the other traditional spider systems that might be out there delivering power for the raised floor, which in turn gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility in the way that we locate people within the space. So if we have to move people around, we're always going to have available power. The way that the system works is you'll come in from the electrical closet with a 50 amp 3-phase feed into what we call a feed module. And then we have 8-foot tracks that literally snap together like Legos to form what we call almost a linear sub panel below the raised floor. Because remember, we're bringing 50 amps of power in, and each one of those user devices that we're going to install has to have a separate circuit breaker. So everybody's going to be independently controlled. Makes for a much more efficient way to bring power out onto the floor. And this particular slide here is showing how we do that. You can see the linear bus track there, that 8-foot section. Every 12 inches we have a receptacle point. And to that we basically have a plug, or what we call a tap-off. And that tap-off head just plugs right into the bus track, energizing 1, 2, or 3 of the phases of the power. And then a flexible whip up to about 25 feet will be attached to floor modules, PDUs, movable walls, powered furniture. Any devices that need to have power brought up from the floor will be attached to the end of that whip. And it makes for extremely easy adds, moves, and changes. So if we have to move people around the space, we just basically unplug them, move them over, plug them back in. It's very, very flexible. And that's something that we're going to see more and more of in the built environment as we start to bring people back into the office spaces. It's having to move people around, maintaining social distancing. We're not going to be able to keep people on top of each other and have to start spreading them out. And this is one way that we can do that for the power. Great slide here showing a typical raised floor of the Snake Bus with our multiple tap-offs coming in. As well as to the left of the bus track itself, you can see one of our cable trays with all the low voltage communication cables. Very clean installation, again, very flexible, and something that we're seeing more and more of as we start to move forward will be these raised floors. And how do we do that? Well, Snake Tray has a lot of great solutions for that. One of the other really cool things about Snake Bus is its ability to be switched. So we do have 3 phases coming into the track itself, and we can turn off and on any of these phases. So as we're looking at, say, Title 24 in California, or more on a national level for ASHRAE 90.1 for energy efficiencies, we do have the ability to both digitally and analog with some switches turn power off to different areas of the office space. So we have occupancy sensors that are coming back to the building management software system. No one's here, we can shut those particular units off. On a daily basis, at the end of the day, we can turn off all the non-essential power. So it does maintain complete compliance with California Title 24 as well as ASHRAE 90.1. Some of our cable management products, some of the things that we're more well known for is managing low voltage data communication cables. And in the underfloor spaces, the 101 series Snake Tray is at the forefront of that for us. This is a completely hand bendable and flexible system so that we can move cables around the floor very easily. It is a true cable tray utilizing a center spine. It has a built-in riser system and attachment component right into the tray itself, so there's no need for extra components. And as you can see from the photographs, bending things, the tray around, say conduits or making a 90-degree sweep is very easily handled. So it's very reusable, works really well for a lead building too. And it's something that we can manage those cables, so that we're not just going to dump the cables underneath the floor. We actually have a tray system that works very well for those environments. The other system that we offer is what we call a Snake Canyon. This is our 301 series cable tray. And this is a cable tray that it's a modular system. So it doesn't come in 10-foot sections. These come in 2x2 squares that actually interface with the floor structure. So we can bring that cable plane up from the bottom of the floor, right below the floor tiles. So it makes it very easy for techs to be able to do any type of maintenance work. You pop a tile, the cable tray is right there. Very simple on the installation. We're looking anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds per 2-foot basket. So ease of installation, the ability to do MAC work is very, very simple. And these particular cable trays are volumetrically large, so that we can handle, 2,000-3,000 cables in any of these baskets. Are available anywhere from 2 to 12 inch in depth. So lots of different possibilities for running our low voltage cables below that raised floor. And again, that's something that we really feel that we're going to see more and more as we start to bring people back. How do we keep people safe? We've always looked, and I mentioned this in the beginning, that we always looked at a per square foot cost from a real estate perspective. But as we bring people in, it's going to be more on the lines of self health and safety effectiveness. How do we keep people safe within these spaces? And environmental air quality is definitely going to be at the forefront. No longer can we just have a lot of mixing of air and pathogens and chemicals. And the raised floor environment is definitely going to be at the forefront here. So we do see more and more of that coming in. Office construction itself is going to move forward. We are going to get through this. People are definitely coming back to work. We're just going to have to really maintain more of a clean communal spaces, and that's something that we see happening more and more. And hopefully we get people back in faster. We want to get this country and globally we want to get the world back up working. So that's our presentation for today, and I do thank you very much for tuning in. And at this time, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. We'll now take some questions. You mentioned hot desking. What does that actually mean?
The term hot desking actually comes from an old naval term of hot bunking, which really comes from the fact that there are more sailors on a ship than there were spaces to sleep or bunks. And each person took their turn in the bunk. So it was a communal living space. If you had 10 people in 5 bunks, it's, 5 at a time. So, hot desking itself is very similar in that it's a shared office space. So there's more people than there are desks. And, we're also looking at a lot of these pop-up spaces where, people will rent a desk by the hour or by the day or by the week. And it's going to be very difficult to maintain these types of spaces. In a new office environment, these types of shared desks can be very less desirable, since the turnover rate to be high and the possibilities may exist where the sanitary conditions could be compromised. We may be looking at the pendulum swinging back to more of a personal cubicle scenario where each person has their own space. Smaller than before, probably, having to keep 6 foot of distance between people. So instead of having a 10 by 10 desk unit, we're maybe seeing these little 6 by 6s or 8 by 8s as it comes through. So, the term is really meant to, really show that people going back and forth between that same space. And how do we really keep those spaces sanitary and clean? It's going to be very difficult. And I think people are going to be more hesitant to utilize that type of office environment. So that's kind of what hot desking means.
In the early slides where you mentioned UFAD, Why is the underfloor system better for air quality?
The whole concept of using a raised floor as the air delivery system allows for a low pressure delivery of environmental air to rise up naturally from the floor column into exhaust via the return ducts placed up into the ceiling. Traditional methodologies that we see now, the air is pumped in from the ceiling. It mixes with the existing environmental air that's already in the space. So any of the off-gassing and exhalations of CO2 and pathogens and dust and the list goes on. It mixes as it comes down into the individual workspace. The raised floor environment does away with that mixing, at least before it gets to the individual. So we're going to bring in clean, purified through air filters and UV sterilization systems, bring that low pressure air below a raised floor up through a diffuser, and have the air column be more of a personal air column. So that air is going to be delivered to the person in a sanitary method before it reaches that mixing zone. And that mixing zone happens at about that 6 to 7 foot level above a raised floor, or above any floor. So bringing that air up through that personal air column is going to keep people a lot safer in the office environment.
Can snake tray bus be used with any type of raised floors, including the ultra-low cell floor styles?
Yes, it can. Snake bus can be used with both traditional post and panel access floor designs that are more mainstream. I mean, when we think of a raised access floor, that's normally what comes to mind is the post and panel. Every 2 foot we have a little post that comes up, and we have a floor tile that sits on that. In years past, maybe they were, say, 6 inches or 12 inches in height. As we started to look at bringing more air-conditioned systems in, especially within like a data center environment, we were seeing floors that were 3 or 4 feet in depth. So, are we going to see those types of depths now in new construction and office space? No, I think we'll see more on that 6 to 12 inch floor height for the post and panel. And that's really the direction that we see it going in. The other type of floor that's out there, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the renovation style, is the ultra low cell floor, where we may have only 1.5 inches or a 3-inch platform built on the existing slab. That's not going to be used for environmental air. That would be more in lines of cable management. So the snake bus actually works with both. Obviously, the post and panel is going to have more height to it, so our system fits very nicely in that. But in the low floor environment, we do have a little bit of a space constraint in that the snake bus itself needs about 2.5 inches. There are some pancake flat floors out there that are only about 1.75 inches height, so the snake bus doesn't work there. But in the more often than not used installations where we have, say, a 3 or a 4-inch cell floor that goes through, snake bus fits in seamlessly. It's a perfect solution for delivering power to both the post and panel as well as the ultra low cell floors.
Thank you all for joining today's webinar. That's all the time we have. Please be sure to stay tuned for more details on next month's webinar. And remember, you can register for future webinars and catch up on past webinars by visiting rahisystems.com.